All right, welcome aboard, guys. Time is once again for the weekly Mac Forum Sunday night video chat. This is the May 10th, 2015 Mother's Day edition. Happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. Hope that you've enjoyed the day. And certainly we hope that all of our forum members who happen to be mothers enjoyed the Mother's Day. I know some of you are probably still celebrating, so hopefully you'll catch the video later in the day here. All right, let's get right down to business. As of about 30 minutes before showtime, we had a total of over 298,000 members. And the newest member is, let me see if I can read my own typing here, Parisi. So welcome aboard. And hopefully as a new member, they'll find some useful information there. Keep in mind, if you're watching the show and you're not yet a member, keep in mind that as a new member, you get to post questions. As a member, you get to post questions, whereas if you're just kind of lurking the forum and search, although you can find your answer, use it, and do all those things, you can't post a question without being a member. So certainly that's some incentive to join the forum and become a contributing member of the community. We have a number of members who, once they become a member, they'll kind of watch and look and listen for a while before they post answers to their questions. So you don't have to wait to start answering questions. If you know the answer, chime right in there. Once you become a member, you can start answering questions from day one if you know the answer. So do that. But a lot of our members will choose to kind of just observe and listen for a while. And you can do either one. And let's move right on now to some of the rest of the things that we had on the agenda for the night. A couple of the things that I want to mention have to do with the Apple Watch. Apple Watch seems to be dominating a lot of the interweb lately. I didn't specifically go out looking for Apple Watch things. Cult of Mac happened to have a couple of interesting things in their lineup this week, and they dealt with Apple Watch. I didn't spend quite as much time searching as I normally do, but these were some things that stuck with me almost from the beginning because they're potentially useful information if you happen to be one of the people who has already purchased an Apple Watch. The first one, and all of the Apple Watch tips for today come from Cult of Mac. We'll have those links up shortly. It describes a procedure. Out of the box, the Apple Watch comes with some predefined messages that can be used to respond to certain things. These are text and messagings that can be used to respond to a variety of situations. Well, what if you want to customize that a little bit? In other words, you don't really like the ones that are included by Apple, and you'd like to have a different message. That is possible. As usual, many of you have realized, if you're a long-term Apple user, you may have realized that Apple frequently gives you a way to customize their offerings, and the watch is no exception. Cult of Mac describes a procedure where you can create custom notifications on the Apple Watch. And to do so, you're going to need to, as with a lot of things that go on the Apple Watch, you're going to need to make use of the Watch app on your iPhone. Launch the Apple Watch app on your iPhone and swipe down to get to the messages area. Tap on the default reply section, and then tap one of the replies and edit, change the message, edit it to change the message as needed. Now, I think that for me, probably it's a good idea to keep the message changes short. In part because, let's face it, with the popularity of the Apple Watch, it's a good probability that the response is going to, over time, as the user base goes, there's a good possibility that it's going to go to another Apple Watch user who'll be reading that notification on their watch instead of their iPad or their phone. So it's probably helpful to keep those short. But you can make them custom, something a little more applicable to your situation. Another one, and I thought this was a brilliant idea because it's something of a good indication of what their Force Touch app can do. Or not an app, but a Force Touch feature. Some of you know that the newest application, MacBook that's been announced, has Force Touch in the trackpad. The watch uses Force Touch. And there's a ton of stuff that you could do with Force Touch. There's already been some suggestion of using it in games, etc., etc., etc. But one of the practical things that they did with the Apple Watch, let's suppose you get a lot of notifications. Over time, I've built up a lot of them in OS 10, under Yosemite in particular. Some of them send out things that might be useful as I'm prepping for the show, but those would not be really handy on a watch. And here's how you can stop that. You can go through the notifications and cancel them one by one on your watch. But if you've got a lot of them that you want to reset and you want to clear them all at once, you press a little bit harder. That's where that Force Touch feature, when you press a little bit harder, the Force Touch feature brings up, when you're at the notifications screen, you press a little bit harder, that activates Force Touch, and it will bring up a Clear All button. And that's going to clear all of the notifications for your watch. That's certainly something to look at and use if you've inadvertently built up a lot of notifications and you find that too many of them are appearing on your watch and you just want to clear them all and kind of quiet things down a little bit. And lastly, as far as the watch goes, came the question about how do you restore your watch from backup. As most of you know, if you're an iPad owner or even an iPhone owner, if you inadvertently forget your passcode and you enter the passcode an incorrect passcode too many times, after a certain number of attempts, your iDevice is locked and you have to basically reset it and reload everything from the backup. Well, the Apple Watch behaves similarly. What happens if you forget your passcode and you really need to adjust things? What you're going to need to do is, so once again, you're going to reset it just like you would your iPhone or your iPad. And here's the good thing. Anytime you unpair from your watch, okay, anytime you separate the watch from the phone, you break that pairing, a backup happens, even without you doing anything. And so to get your content back on your watch, you're going to simply launch your Apple Watch app on the iPhone and choose Restore from Backup. And you'll have a chance to choose which backup you would like to use. Your Apple Watch and iPhone will connect and put all your things back where they were when the last backup was made. And what happens is this backup is stored within your iPhone backup. So This lets you restore all the apps and settings and content. Basically, treating the watch as the tiny little computer that it is. The Apple Watch backups are included as part of your iPhone backup and to the iCloud or iTunes. And they tell you this in the manual, but what they don't necessarily explain very well is you can't view information in the backups that are in the cloud. I don't think you can restore individual items. You're having to basically restore everything from a backup. So that's something to keep in mind. It's certainly the fact that a backup occurs without your intervention when you unpair is a good thing. I wish I could tell you what software engineer or interface designer thought of that. At the moment, I don't know, but I think it was a brilliant idea. It probably came from somebody that's lost way too much information over the years due to forgetting to make a backup. And speaking of backups, I want to encourage you to make sure that you know whether you've got backups going set up on your iPhone, on your iCloud account, or iTunes. Either way, but make sure you do regularly make sure and check when your most recent backup is, because I ran into a situation recently. I use my iPad at work, and sometimes students will use it in my classroom for a few minutes, and I've got some educational things on there that they can use, but I also have it passcoded, where I have restrictions turned on so it can't get into things like my email and some other things. And one day, I changed the passcode. I like to do that periodically so that they can't accidentally observe me entering the passcode. And I changed the passcode that morning. Well, unfortunately, I got pretty busy and kind of forgot what I had changed the passcode to. And as usual, when I got ready to use it, the passcode that I entered, no matter what variation I thought I had used, did not work. And eventually I ran out of passcode attempts and basically had to clear the, just let it sit and come home, connect it to the iPad, and basically restart it. Clear it back from scratch and go through the whole setup procedure and then reload from the backup. Fortunately, there were very few things that I had added since the last backup. There was only, I think, a couple of apps, if I remember correctly, and I knew what those were, so it was a relatively simple process to do. And keep in mind, when you're doing that procedure, one thing to keep in mind is that you've got to be connected. Your iTunes library needs to be available if it's going to work fully, because the first time I connected, I forgot that the drive that houses my iTunes library was not attached. I wasn't directly connected to that drive. For some reason, my time capsule is not reading that drive right now unless I'm directly connected to it, to the drive. It's not reading over the network like it used to for some reason. I haven't started troubleshooting that, but the net result is when I first did the restore, I got a warning about several things not being able to be restored, and that was because it was about 30 apps. And the reason for that is those were things that I'd added that were not part of the stock setup, and my iTunes library drive was not available at the time. And of course, the process is relatively simple. Make sure that the fix for that, rather, is relatively simple. Make sure that you have the iTunes library drive available when you're restoring an iDevice from backup. So that's a handy little backup tip. One other thing to keep in mind, the backups, to me, the way the iOS backups behave They're a little more like an archive than a backup, in the sense that let's say that you back up today, May 10th, and your previous backup was, say, May the 5th, and in between times, you've made some changes to your apps and some other things. In a typical backup setting, the only thing that would be there is whatever was most recent, May the 10th, whatever you backed up on to on May the 10th. So in other words, all of the files that you backed up on May the 10th will be there. But in an archive, um, you have all of the files up to that point. And that becomes important if you accidentally delete a file. Time Machine behaves this way. It's more like an archive than a backup. If you did a Time Machine backup, let's just say that you went back 3 days and got something, a file that you had deleted. In an archive, that file is there. If you go back 3 days, that file is there as it was 3 days ago. In a backup, though, when you remove that file from your hard drive and then you perform a backup afterwards, the file is not there. Why? Because it wasn't there when the backup was created. In an archive, I can go backwards. It's essentially keeping a sequence or a chain of backups, for lack of a better word. I personally like the idea. I know that many people are concerned about Time Machine and archiving taking up space. I personally like the idea of having that archive capability in a relatively easy to manage situation. And before I leave the show this evening, we got a few more minutes to go. It's going to be a little bit shorter. I try to keep the ones where I'm by myself down to about a half an hour, because you probably don't want to hear me bloviate for more than that. But here's one for you. I want to mention to some of you, just in case you happen to get your mom's, some of you happen to get your mother's tech gadgetry for Mother's Day. Something occurred to me, and I wish this had dawned on me last weekend. Okay, I'd have mentioned it before Mother's Day as opposed to waiting to Mother's Day to do this. Many of us are in situations where we are the tech support people in the family. So you buy a gift for Mother's Day and you're trying to set it up in such a way that it's easy to use. That's a good thing. But don't forget to set up some things that make it not only easy to use, but personal. For example, one of the things that you can do, haven't done this to my mom's phone yet, or to my phone to a great extent, but it's relatively easy to do. Depending on which phone model you have, there are different ways of going about it. But think about this. What if, when you got the phone and helped set up the practical things like voicemail and setting up the email account and making sure messaging works, how about going in and making sure that all of the contacts contain a picture, so that when the phone rings from one of the kids, a picture pops up on mom's phone, or one of the grandkids. Phone rings from one of the grandkids, picture of the grandkid pops up. That kind of thing. Using custom ringtones, which are relatively easy to create. You can do them using iTunes. There's also a number of good third-party ringtone creators out there. You can buy them if you like. I personally prefer, more often than not, if I'm going to use a custom ringtone, which I don't do very often. But if I'm going to do that, then what I'll do is create them using something in my iTunes library, rather than going out and buying a new ringtone. Because for the most part, I I already have the music or the sound that I want to use. You do want to be sure that when you set up a custom ringtone, you want to keep that sound that you're using as a ringtone short, particularly for things that you're going to hear a lot, people who call you a lot. Because the longer that ringtone is, a long ringtone, it might sound nice at first, but it gets kind of annoying after a while, especially if you're in a meeting and you forget to turn your phone off, and that ringtone goes off, and instead of lasting a second or two, it's 30, 40 seconds. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're creating ringtones. But being able to add things like custom notifications on the Apple Watch, being able to add custom ringtones. And you can add custom ringtones, if I'm not mistaken, to the Android phones as well. You're just going to have to do some poking around on the internet to find the directions for your particular phone. It's relatively easy on the iPhone. We have some threads about that in the on the forum in the past. Do a quick forum search, and you'll have it in no time. There's always, things like that, but I mean little things like that. A larger project that obviously you can't do for this year for Mother's Day, but maybe for next year. Take some of the old photographs and old video and kind of compile it into something useful for mom to look at. Most families have a ton of photos, movie footage, etc., 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 from when the kids were little. So, maybe for next year, go ahead and compile that into one thing. Something that mom can use, a slideshow or something of that nature. I've also liked the idea for a while now of using digital photo frames, because so many people are shooting photos now with their phones, with digital cameras, etc., etc., etc. It bypasses the need to develop the photo and then scan it in, and you can rotate out pictures relatively easily. Some of these digital photo frames, to go along with the idea of making them customizable, some of these digital photo frames are internet enabled, in the sense that you can upload new pictures to the frame remotely. That's something to keep in mind if your mom is someone who likes to use the technology but doesn't like to micromanage the adding of new content and things like this. So keep that in mind as you go about the week. And I'd like to hear some of your other project ideas. Father's Day is coming up in June. Some of these tasks and projects certainly could be applied to for dads out there, to give them something that they would like. There's all kinds of tech-related projects that give you a chance to play around and learn a new tech skill, and at the same time create something memorable for family members. So I hope you find those ideas helpful. If you're interested in some of those ideas, let me know, and I'll include some more detailed directions. With summer coming back around again, I hope to get back into writing for the blog regularly, and let me include some of these projects as some of the content for the blog. So keep that in mind. And that's going to just about do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week. The tips, the Apple Watch tips. Remember, backing up automatically. It happens as you unpair the watch. And that means that you can restore your data by going into the Apple Watch application on your phone. And you can restore things to the phone. You can adjust custom alerts through the Apple Watch. So there's all kinds of things that that you can do. In the coming weeks, I'll be bringing you perhaps more in the way of Apple Watch tips, as well as other iOS and Mac tips as well. So keep an eye out for those. And I hope that you've enjoyed this week's tips and the rest of the show. Until next week, I'm Sylvester Rock, your host, aka Sly Dude on the forum. Look for me during the week, and if you have a comment about the show or something you'd like to see us improve or any other suggestions, we have a ongoing sticky thread devoted to the Sunday chat, so feel free to post a comment or a suggestion there. And until next week, this is your host, Sly Dude. I will see you next week, and I hope you enjoyed this evening's show.